Hey friends, welcome to the Soulfire Sessions at the intersection of passion and purpose, where you align with what sets your soul on fire. We're your hosts, Alex and Christina, and we are so grateful you're here with us today. We are all about reclaiming clarity, rebuilding confidence, and designing a future that actually fits you. So let's take a breath, feel the spark, and we'll step into the fire. Hey, Christina.
Hey, Alex, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I am doing well. I am really excited to be here with Matt today and to learn all that he has to share with us. So I'm really, really excited.
Good. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm so excited to have a special guest host. Yay! Hi, Matt. How are you?
Doing wonderful. Hi, Alex. Hi, Christina. So nice to be here.
Yeah, we're so grateful you're with us today. Thank you for saying yes to me.
Absolutely. That was easy.
Yes. Well, let me introduce you, Matt. For those that don't know, Dr. Matt Daniel is the Associate Vice President for Partnership Development at Abilene Christian University. He has a lot of experience in the corporate world and transforming companies. Matt was in my dissertation program with me and was one piece of what we called the Positrio,
Yes.
a group that we developed. Yes. Actually, what's funny is you guys will have already heard the episode that Jordan was in by the time this one airs, and he was the other part of our Positive Trio group, which was awesome. But anyway, Matt wrote his dissertation about psychological safety in business-to-business sales, and I think psych safety is so important in all areas of our life. But I think it can really affect how we are at work. Even if we're lacking safety or if we have it, either way, it can impact how we are as individual contributors, how we are as leaders. And so I think it's just such an important topic to talk about and something we haven't really talked about yet. So welcome, Matt.
Thank you. Again, it's so great to be here. I'm really excited to talk about this. It's something that I'm really passionate about and just look forward to diving in with you here on this. I wanted to start out with a story that explains how psychological safety can get absolutely destroyed in just minutes. This is a real story. This happened to me. It was a number of years ago, and there was a new manager for the location that I worked at, a new general manager. And everybody was excited and nervous to meet him. He got everybody in the room together. And I don't know if this is his exact words, but basically he came into the room and said, "Hello, everybody. It's so great to see you and meet you. Before we get started, I'd like to let you know that I can fire any of you for any reason at any time." And then he commenced to give us this pep talk of how everybody needed to essentially interview for their job over the next couple of weeks and that he was going to be observing everybody. And in that instant, you could see everybody's face and jaws just like drop and like, what is happening here? Am I going to get fired instantly? And in my mind, I already knew that I was not going to work for this person and I was going to find another job just as soon as possible. So fast forward a couple of weeks later, and I went ahead and got another job. I'd already been getting called from other people. And so I called one back and said, yes, I'm interested. And I didn't let the manager know until the very last day. So I made sure that my paycheck cleared. And then I walked into his office at 4:30 on a Friday and said, "Hey, today's my last day. I'll see you later." And he got up. He's like, "What? How could you do this? How could you just quit on me in the last day without giving me 2 weeks notice?" And I said to him, "Well, if you remember a couple of weeks ago when you got us all in the room, you said that you could fire us for any time at any reason. So I can also quit at any time for any reason. See you later." But during those 2 weeks after that, even though that was like 2 minutes of the introduction, and then we got into the meeting, it destroyed everybody's psychological safety. at that point, everybody was walking on eggshells, trying to find out if he's in a good mood or a bad mood that day, talking amongst themselves about different ideas, but nobody would share anything about how to make the business better. Nobody would communicate because they were scared of getting insulted or ridiculed about what they had said. And so psychological safety very quickly was destroyed in that environment. And I'm not sure if it ever recovered because I left 2 weeks later saying that I wasn't going to work in that kind of an environment. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I've heard this story, but I just feel like now I've heard it for the first time again.
Yeah.
And first of all, what an introduction to the podcast. I think that's the best intro story we've ever had. So bravo. Good for you. That's what I want to say next for recognizing that that was not an environment you needed or wanted to be in and you got out. But third, I know what psychological safety is. Christina knows what that is. You obviously know what that is. But can you explain that to our listeners so that they understand what we're talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the most important things to understand about psychological safety is that it's a team construct. It's not a one-to-one individual thing. It is about sharing ideas and being able to speak up, make mistakes, share ideas without fear of punishment or humiliation within a team environment. So it's different than trust. And it's also, it's okay to disagree. This doesn't mean that everyone is faking their smiles and going along just to get along. It's about creating this environment where people can share these ideas and feel like there's mutual respect, that there's civility, that it's okay to challenge because it's done with good intentions. And there's not this abusive behavior or insulting or shaming or ridiculing, not only by the manager, but by anyone else on the team. And I think that's one of the things that make it so difficult in the real world to create a psychological safe environment is because the manager can do everything right from their point of view. They can use emotional intelligence and self-regulate and say what they want to say in a positive way, have the difficult conversations. But in a team environment, there are also all the other folks in there. So sometimes the manager's having to triage and have these difficult conversations on a one-on-one basis when someone kind of jumps out of line a little bit in a team call. You know, we're all in Zooms all the time. And even in on-site meetings or these other meetings, you know, there's always the calls after the call. Like we'll close a Zoom and like my phone will blow up with 3 people that were in the meeting that want to talk about something that happened after the meeting. And sometimes it's like, well, so-and-so said something that really, you know, set me, you know, back on my heels, or I didn't want to say anything there. And we have to talk about some of these different behaviors and then coach the rest of the team. So it's not just about yourself creating this environment that everyone feels good about, but it's also managing those team dynamics. And that's where you really have to be committed to creating that environment because it's a lot of work. But that's kind of what it is. Like I said, it's really important to understand it's this team climate and environment. And you really, as a leader, have to work with everybody to continue to nurture that so that everyone's comfortable.
That's great. And I think for the listener, going back to Matt's story, the first statement the manager made when he came in is, I could fire any of you at any time for any reason. That immediately turned safety off. Mm-hmm. That was that statement. And so for people who are listening who have had leaders or managers or coworkers who have that sort of toxicity or feeling where you walk on eggshells with them, that is when you know there is no safety or limited safety in your environment.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Christina, what do you think?
It's such an interesting concept to be able to identify something as being psychologically safe versus unsafe. And I wonder if there's someone in our audience who's sitting there thinking like, oh, I just thought my manager was a jerk. But really what I should have been thinking was, this is a psychologically unsafe environment. And so how would we educate our listeners or encourage them so that maybe they can apply this to what they're walking through? How do they know if it's a lack of trust versus just someone who's not nice versus a psychologically unsafe environment? How do we decide that?
Mm. That's a really interesting question. And there's a lot of dynamics at play. Number one is in a psychologically unsafe environment, one of the key symptoms is silencing, self silencing. That when you think, I want to say something, but I'm too afraid to say it because I don't want someone else to think it's a bad idea. I don't want to put myself out there. Now, even people that are shy or introverted may feel that way in a perfectly safe environment. So you do have to kind of think through, is it because I feel actually unsafe and that something bad is going to happen? What is that based on? Is it based on previous interactions with this group where I have said something and somebody else said that's a completely stupid idea? We would never do that. Or somebody else says something to make you feel bad? Or is it just because you're shy, or maybe you're new to the job or feeling uncomfortable? Because one of the best things that you can do as an individual to kind of push through that, even in a risky environment, is to have some courage, to go ahead and put yourself out there and see how it lands. And then let that take its course. If it is a toxic environment and what you said didn't sit well or wasn't respected, then you know that you can try to have some additional conversations either with your teammates or with the manager. But if you have that one-on-one with the manager and they don't receive it well, and they're like, listen, you just need to buck up. You need to stop being so sensitive. This is the way we work here. This is a bunch of high performers and blah, blah, blah. And they don't really want to listen to these concerns or make them, like I said, the manager having to work saying, well, now I've got to have a conversation with Sally because, she really was kind of stepping out of line there. And those are frustrating things. Then you can kind of sort through what that culture is and then how you want to move forward. Sometimes I think we tend to go to extremes. On a day-to-day work, there's always extremes, but you've got a good manager who might be having a bad day, or a good team that might just have had somebody that is a little stressed out one day. So you have to kind of have some patience and grace and think through, is today I'm going to be courageous. I'm going to go ahead and say this idea. There's not a lot of environments where they're toxic all day, every day. There are some, but you have to have some courage and you have to have some forgiveness in order to kind of push through those tougher times when you might be feeling a little exposed or vulnerable.
Love that.
That's great advice. I know you've done a lot of research on psych safety, but I think sometimes it's hard to differentiate between a manager who might just have control issues or trust issues, but they don't maybe intentionally create this psychologically unsafe space. Like they just haven't dealt with their own stuff and might need feedback, So if that's the case, do you have advice for like how to deal with that type of manager?
I guess that depends on what you're going to assume this manager is like. So if they're doing things that are creating a risky environment or an unsafe environment, but it's not intentional, they just haven't been coached on how to have these proper conversations, or may not always say things the right way. I will say that even someone such as myself who has researched this and is totally committed to it, I have to have one-on-one conversations with individuals about, hey, do you still feel safe contributing? I had a conversation a few weeks ago and they're like, well, not always. And I said, well, what can I do? And they said, well, you're the boss. So you haven't done anything that makes me feel unsafe, but you're the boss. And so sometimes it's intimidating. And so I have to work on them feeling courageous enough, because there's just the power dynamic that is getting in the way. Even though you're trying to create this great environment, there's still this a little bit of intimidation factor or things like that. But if a manager is truly interested in creating this safe environment, and I want to go off to the side for just a second and say, why do we even care if people feel safe? Like, okay, great, I feel safe in this environment. I can talk and share ideas. But really, like, what's the whole point of this as a business? It's really because it's one of the keys to innovation. It's one of the keys to continuous improvement. It's one of the keys to somebody knows in the room something that can benefit the organization, whether it's something about the competition or a great idea to improve something in the workplace or whatever the case may be. And so if those open channels of communication aren't operating efficiently and effectively because people aren't contributing, then the organization suffers. That's why we want to understand it. That's why we want to create these environments in an organization, is because we can operate at a higher level. This is how you create high performing teams and high performing organizations. But back to your question, if the manager's open to it, then really it's about the employee having the courage to say, I had this idea, but I was uncomfortable sharing it with the group. So sometimes you might need to build some trust on a one-to-one level in order for them to feel like they can contribute in the group environment. You might encourage them. So I had someone that's a little bit shy about these things, and I said, those are great ideas. I think that the team would benefit if you shared those ideas, and I'll support those ideas publicly in front of them. So encourage them to share those, because a lot of really cool things happen when you start sharing your knowledge and you have something to contribute. Then the team starts to identify what your strengths are. And so, for example, on my team, I have someone that has established themselves as kind of like the expert on anything technical or AI. So the rest of the team talks to her when there's technical questions about our software or AI questions, and somebody else who's really good at building relationships. And so they'll talk to her when they're like, how should I say this, or how should I frame up this conversation with this client in order to continue to build relationships? So when they see these things with each other and the gifts and talents that each other has, then they start establishing themselves. So you really want to encourage those people that are a little nervous about sharing to do so, and then give them that acknowledgement and recognition publicly to kind of give them that spark to do it again on the next call, on the next time that we're meeting together as a team.
I love that. When I worked at Sam's Club, we would talk about our competition, about our competitor, which this cost was at, the largest big box is Costco. And we often talked about how Costco would celebrate failures. Like they would celebrate failing fast, right? Because if you're just doing the same thing in and out every single day, then there's no progress being made. So being courageous enough, to use your word, Matt, to try something new. And then we just don't want to do it for a really long time. We want to fail fast if it's not going to work. So, really short, like we want to fail fast. If it's failing, let's walk away and say, okay, well, we tried it. Maybe we could learn from it, try it again in a different way in the future, or we'll know really quickly and we can expand it. And so I think what you said is exactly right. Not only as the people in the room with the ideas to be courageous to share those, but as the leaders to be identifying those people within our organizations, within our teams who maybe aren't as likely to speak up, and encouraging them and like fanning that flame, because you never know what that person says. The idea might be great, and it could also spark an even bigger idea or a better idea with someone else on the team. And next thing you know, you're off to the races with something really new and fresh and profitable. So absolutely, as a leader, want to make sure that we're creating those environments where everyone feels safe to speak up and to be heard.
I love that you brought up failure. And I was going to actually ask Matt about failure too. What does failure look like in a psychologically safe environment versus an unsafe environment?
In an unsafe environment, failure looks like it's a personal indictment on you as a person and your character, and that you are a failure because your idea was a failure. That's kind of the worst case scenario. So someone feels like they let everybody else down and they can't forgive themselves. And so they're never going to contribute anything else again, right? And they just crawl into their shell. In a psychologically safe environment, like you said, Christina, these failures, people are eager to share because it's a temporary thing. It's like we'll have these conversations and someone will step out and say, yeah, I did this the other day and it didn't work so well. And I'm like, oh, well, that's interesting. Does anybody have some ideas that we can try? And then they might have 3 different ideas. And then all of a sudden we're like, oh, well, that sounds like fun. Let's try this and this and this and see which one of those works better. And all of a sudden it's more about a game and finding different ways to succeed as opposed to focusing on the failure, because a lot of people will dwell on what didn't work, but they won't quickly move on to, well, let's try these three things and see how those work, right? And if those don't work, that's fine, because there's another three ideas after that. And then if those don't work, then maybe we need to pivot and try a different strategy. But there's forward motion, right? There's not the stopping and then kind of focusing on the failure. And then there's no next step. You just wallow in that instead of moving forward. So in a psychological safe environment, it's almost like a game, and people are excited to express their failures because it means that they're that much closer to getting ideas on how to be successful.
That's so great. Thank you for sharing that. I have these like two burning questions, and I want some tips and tricks from you. So the first one is, if somebody is in an unsafe environment, how can they cope? Like, what can they do?
I have a lot of experience on in these toxic environments. I spent a lot of years in certain corporate and private equity environments that were super intense, and in some cases were very toxic and unsafe. How do you protect yourself? One is to try to limit your exposure to certain individuals who might be the most toxic. Now, in my research, I talk about this concept called leader-member interdependence. And if you have a micromanager, it might be hard to distance yourself because they're in your ear constantly telling you what to do and how to do it. So avoidance isn't always optimal, but if you can limit, or you can limit the exposure doing emails and texts versus doing Zoom calls, whatever you can do to limit some of that negativity is going to help. The other thing is to remind yourself of the value that you bring and the intelligence that you have. You have to have a little bit of resilience, and you have to be able to give yourself some positive affirmations. And I would also say one of the things that's really important in the good times and in the bad is to align what you do at work with your purpose or your calling, meaning you might have a difficult environment, but if you know that when you get up and go to work that day, you're expressing whatever it is that's your personal mission in life or your value. So if you feel like you're helping people or educating people or doing something for the greater good, it can help you build resilience against the things that are being thrown your way in these toxic environments and unsafe environments, because you have that personal purpose that kind of supersedes the environment that you're in. Ideally, you want to be in a healthy environment and with your purpose, and then that's when you're totally aligned. But I would say that making sure that you kind of know the purpose of why you're there and how you express yourself in the workplace is one of the very best things to build resilience in those difficult environments.
I love that, Matt. My first thought was, well, we figure out how to leave, right? And then if we can't do that, because it's not always an option, right? How do we cope with it where we are? And knowing your purpose and knowing what you value most, and are you able to, like, does that align, and is the juice worth the squeeze, I guess, if you will, is one of those things. While you were talking, something that came up for me was, once that psychological safety is broken, is there a way, or how can it ever be repaired?
And I'll go back to the research that I did and then maybe talk a little bit more about it in the real world. But there was this concept that I looked at called leader-member interdependence. And the study was a little bit different. I mean, it was about abusive supervisors and how psychological safety was impacted, which then ultimately impacted the sales team's performance. There was this moderating variable called leader-member interdependence. And when you could have a healthy interaction with your supervisor, it rebuilt the relationship. It buffered, in the statistical terms, it buffered the moderating effect, meaning it helped mitigate the damage that was done if it was done in a constructive way. So what does that look like in the real world? Well, in this leader-member interdependence, you might have a manager that, after maybe not controlling their emotions so well, snapped at somebody or said something rude in the meeting, which then kind of diminished the psychological safety. The other thing that I'll say is the ability to repair also is directly related to how severe the incident was and how frequently these things occur. So think about a manager that is an amazing manager that does everything right 99% of the time. Happened to say something that destroyed some psychological safety at the moment. And the reaction by the team must be, wow, he must be having a really hard day because I've never seen that, him or her do that or say that before. So they give him the benefit of the doubt, right? But somebody that does these things relatively moderately or severe and does them frequently, it's like, oh, so-and-so is in a good mood or a bad mood today, stay away. And it's really hard if you've created this environment from a lot of repetitive bad behavior to heal the organization or heal the team. But assuming that you can get through that, a lot of this mitigation can be with the one-on-one work and rebuilding trust, one individual at a time, before the team will trust you collectively. And so whether that's just saying, hey, sorry about losing my temper on the call the other day. It wasn't personal. I was just, had some other things going on. Oh, okay, I understand. Thank you for telling me. Or it could be just through supporting, hey, yeah, I think that's a great idea. I approve that discount, or I really like this proposal. Let me help you get this submitted. And you're helping them do their work, making their lives easier through some of these positive interactions. And Alex, from our studies together, it can take up to 5 kind of positive or high quality interactions to counteract one negative interaction. And so it's not like, well, I said one nice thing, so I'm done. You really have to have multiple positive interactions from an individual level and from a team level in order to mitigate or remove the detrimental effects of that previous incident. So it's a lot of work. It's a lot easier just to not do that in the first place. And you'll save yourself a lot of extra work to try to heal the organization from those incidents.
That's great. That was a great question, Christina, because that's true. And sometimes you might not realize you're doing that until it's too late. And so then what, I've heard you say a lot, managers or leaders should spend one-on-one time building relationships or building relationships with their team, sort of like building protection around them or helping them feel safe. So are there other, I don't want to use the word tips and tricks, but are there other ways that a leader can build psych safety within their organization?
Yeah, again, and if we're assuming that there's some level of toxic environment or a psychologically unsafe environment within the organization, you can create what I called a bubble, a little bit of a bubble of safety or a bubble of protection. So what that looks like is, when you and your team are interacting together, there's a climate of safety and protection and support. And so you're able to do amazing things with that team. You can find that your team can rise above the level of performance than the average group, whether that's in sales or operations, whatever it is. So that doesn't mean you can protect them from all the other external forces that are happening outside of your direct influence. But what you can do is help them feel successful and safe and contribute ideas within the team level so that your team operates better and has better ideas and has higher engagement. And so you're able to create that bubble of safety and protection. Then people start looking like, wow, what are they doing over there? Wow, they're really doing amazing things, even in a larger, more toxic or unsafe type of an environment. But it's really up to the manager to create that climate for the team and then let the team reinforce and build that over time.
That's great advice, and can sort of offer you protection within an overall organization that might not have that, but your group or department or whatever might have that. And I think you can still thrive in that environment. If you have, a direct supervisor that is providing safety for you and a team that's providing safety for you, then there's still ways to fail and recover from that and learn from that and grow from that and innovate from that. So that's great.
Yeah.
I love the discussion around psychological safety and the responsibility of the leader to ensure that, we're creating environments where everyone has psychological safety, but then also for the employee or like the direct report to kind of to own their own stuff in the middle of that, right? Like they have
Hmm.
triggers that are coming up for them and feelings, and to kind of walk through that, and then how we've armed them with, ways that they can approach this to kind of help create or repair a psychologically unsafe
Hmm.
environment. I feel like those are all things that we've all been in those situations, and it's kind of ironic, Matt, that we're here talking about this because you don't know me and I don't know you any more than what anyone's seen here. And I have actually lived what you studied. So I have been on a sales team where we had a leader who did absolutely create a psychologically unsafe environment. And we saw that impacted in our sales numbers, absolutely
Hmm.
saw a direct effect. And we saw high turnover, we saw unsatisfied employees, we saw silent quitting, which is like the new
Hmm.
term, right? Because no one wanted to engage. It can spiral really quickly. So I love that we're bringing this out in the open and having a conversation around what it is and how we can approach it.
Yeah, that's so great. Yeah, that's how it looks in the real world when you don't have that kind of a safe environment. In the research that I did, that particular study, basically when it was all said and done and calculated based on the survey response, the sales performance was impacted at an average level because there were lots of survey respondents, but on average, you could say that an abusive supervisor impacted psychological safety to where there was a 10% decrease in sales performance because of those directly attributed to those behaviors. That could be the difference between someone making their quota or missing it and getting on a performance plan, just that one factor.
Yeah, I mean, in business terms, that directly affects your bottom line negatively, right? And the crazy part in my mind is like sometimes the leader who is not creating that environment that they should be creating is then blaming it on their team.
Right.
Our bottom line is suffering because you aren't doing your job, and it's like, but I'm suffering because you're not doing your
Yeah,
job.
that's that downward spiral, right? Instead of the upward one,
Yes,
it's that you want, it's the downward one. Yeah, that you don't want.
that's right. Well, Matt, thank you so much for the talk about psych safety.
Yeah.
I feel like we could talk for another hour about this topic, but we're getting close to time. So there are two questions I ask every guest, and I'm going to ask you those now.
All
The
right.
first question, the first question is, what sets your soul on fire?
Thank you for that. I had an experience recently, about a few weeks ago, and when we were talking about personal missions and so forth, my personal mission is really about sharing knowledge to help others succeed. That's how I've kind of phrased my mission is if I can share some advice or some knowledge or anything with you that helps you and makes you more successful in some way, then I've achieved what I set out to do in terms of my own purpose. And a few weeks ago, I was sitting down at a trade show with a coworker, and they shared with me. They said, back in February, I asked you for some feedback, and you were hesitant to give it to me. And after insisting and insisting, you gave it to me, and they had to process it. So 9 months later, they said that the advice that you gave me changed my whole perspective. It impacted me and will continue to impact me. And it's improved everything that I've thought about in terms of work and all of that. And I just had this huge like spark of joy. That was just a moment that I had, okay, you asked for it. Here's my advice for you. And then move on for the rest of the day. And I'd kind of forgotten about it. And so when someone lets me know that something that I did for them or said gave them a positive impact in their life, that just brings me pure joy.
That's amazing. I love that. And that's a different sort of response than we've gotten before. But it is important because as we know, positive emotions are
Hmm.
important for our own well-being, but then once we have those, we can give those as well. It's like a gift to others. And so cyclical that you were able to help them and it also brought you joy, and I love that. It was probably a blessing.
Yeah, really was.
So the second question is if someone else is trying to figure out what sets their soul on fire, what advice do you have for them?
Yeah, I had to think about this one, and it's a little bit related to the first question, meaning the advice that I would give to someone is to really think with deep thought and intention about what brings them joy, what they feel their purpose is. And you really need to think about it because, everybody's moving so fast nowadays. It's just one thing to the next, and you're reacting to so many things. And you forget to ask yourself, like, who am I? Why am I here? What is my purpose? Right. And I would say for someone to really start, if they really want to spark that fire and set their soul on fire, is think about the moments that spark joy. Think about the moments when you're engrossed in something, you're in the flow. Think about the moments that you just love and you lose track of time, or that you feel energized, and start trying to rationalize, like, when do these things happen? What are the circumstances? What are the commonalities between all of these things? And really be intentional about trying to create more of those experiences, trying to learn more about who you are and how you can achieve fulfilling your purpose as much as you can through your day-to-day life. Once you start doing that, I feel like your soul will be set on fire. It's not something that happens overnight. It takes intention and commitment. And at least in my experience, it's taken me years of thinking like that and wanting to be like that. And for a long time thinking that this is my life. I can't seem to get out of whatever, rut that I'm in or difficult situation that I'm in. But slowly over time, if you really start aligning your actions and making decisions based on your calling and your purpose, you will find one day that you wake up that your soul's on fire. That's what I would tell somebody if that's what they want to find is that sense of purpose and soul fire, as you say.
That's so good. And you did just tell a bunch of people that. So,
So let's go
so
do
thank
it.
you. Yeah, let's do it. I love that. There's so many different ways to approach that question, what sets your soul on fire? And I love that you said figure out what brings you joy and your purpose. And I know because you had to do this assignment too, but the question we got about if you could do anything and not fail, what would you do? And that's
Hmm.
kind of where my sort of wheels started turning was when I answered that question. And then it was like, this is what I would do if I couldn't fail. But then why are you not doing that?
Hmm.
You know? And if it's just fear of failure, then we got to go back to that courage piece that you've talked about a lot. And I think the same goes with, what brings you joy. And what people don't always understand is that what sets your soul on fire might not be a job, right? It could be,
Right.
and we talk about this a lot, it could be a passion you have on the side or a side hustle or a project or something that you do on the weekends, even. Like it doesn't have to be your full time role. Obviously, going to work is a little bit easier when it's something you enjoy doing versus something you don't enjoy. But I do love that you said figure out what brings you joy. That's a great way for people to think about it. So thank you for that.
Yeah, my pleasure. And it's been so much fun watching your journey as well over these years. And I just love where you're at right now. I see such a big difference.
Thank you. And I know we've had many a conversations about all of my struggles and where I was at before. And it's just different. It's different now. So I have really enjoyed this. And the podcast has given me a lot of joy. Sort of full circle moment there. So, Matt, I know you have a free webinar series that we could invite people to, and I'm happy to put that link in the show notes. But can you just give us a quick blurb about what that is?
Yeah, so our next one, we're taking the holidays off, and our next one's in February. But essentially, we're doing free webinars, mostly around positive leadership topics. Our next one is 3 great things that teams do. The previous one that we did is 3 great things that leaders do, as well as effective presentations and presenting with purpose. So these are just open professional development webinars that are hosted by our executive education and professional advancement group. They're an amazing group of individuals, and we're just putting them out there for anyone that wants to learn something new and apply some of these different skills and topics to their life.
That's great. Yeah. So we will put that link in the show notes for anyone that's interested. Again, that is free. So, okay, Matt, thank you so much. Christina, thank you for joining us today. Where can our listeners find us?
Yeah, so our listeners can find us anywhere you get your podcasts. They can also find us on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook, as well as TikTok.
Yes, ma'am. And you can find our website at thesoulfire.com. Again, that's thesoulfire.com. On that website, we have all of our offerings and information about who we are and what we do and how we want to help you. So, Matt, again, thank you for saying yes and for joining us today. And we hope everyone has a wonderful day.
Thank you so much. It was great to meet you, Christina. Always a pleasure, Alex. Thank you so much for your time today.
Yes, thank you.